My name is Essie Thompson, 62 years old, and I never thought my retirement years would involve being called a maid in my own house. I was preparing dinner for my family when my daughter-in-law Lisa called me exactly that right in front of her parents. What hurt most wasn't just the insult, but seeing my son's face, not defending me. Little did she know I had a condition when I helped buy that house. Before I continue this story, where are you watching from today? Drop a comment below. Hit that like button and subscribe. If you want more real-life stories that might just teach us all something about standing up for ourselves. I raised my son James all by myself after my husband Robert died in a car accident when James was only 6 years old. Robert was heading home from work when a drunk driver ran a red light and hit him. The police officers who came to our door that night changed our lives forever. I remember holding James in my arms, both of us crying, wondering how we would move forward without the man who had been our rock. Insurance money helped for a while, but it wasn't enough to sustain us for long. I had been a part-time elementary school teacher, but after Robert died, I took on full-time teaching during the day and waited tables at night. My mother would watch James in the evenings, and those few hours when I would come home exhausted, I made sure to spend quality time with my son. We would read together, play board games, or just talk about his day at school. James was a bright child, sensitive and kind. He excelled in school, especially in mathematics and science. He was the type of boy who would bring home stray animals and beg to keep them. He would give his lunch to classmates who forgot theirs. His heart was as big as the sky, and sometimes I worried the world might take advantage of that kindness. As a teenager, James was more interested in books and computers than sports. He had a small group of close friends who would gather at our modest home to work on science projects or play video games. I noticed early on that James was somewhat naive when it came to girls. His first girlfriend in high school took advantage of his generosity, always asking for gifts and favors. When she broke his heart by cheating on him with the football quarterback, I held him as he cried, wishing I could shield him from all pain. Despite these heartaches, James maintained his gentle nature. He won a partial scholarship to State University, studying engineering. I was so proud watching him walk across that stage at graduation, becoming the first person in our family to earn a college degree. I had worked 2 jobs for years, putting aside every extra penny for his education. Those late nights and early mornings had been worth every minute. After graduation, James landed a job at a reputable engineering firm in the city. His starting salary was more money than I had ever made in a year. He insisted on helping me financially, but I encouraged him to save for his future instead. James was doing well at work, gradually climbing the corporate ladder with his intelligence and work ethic. Then, at 28, James met Lisa at his company. She worked in marketing, was 4 years younger than him, and according to James, she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. When he first mentioned her, his eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen before. He talked about her constantly, her intelligence, her confidence, her ambition. After dating for just 2 months, he brought her home to meet me. I still remember the first time I met Lisa. She was indeed beautiful, with perfectly styled blonde hair, immaculate makeup, and designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She was polite enough, but something about her smile didn't quite reach her eyes when she looked at me or our modest home. Throughout dinner, she barely asked any questions about our family or showed interest in the photos of James growing up that I had proudly displayed. Instead, she talked mostly about herself, her career goals, her travel plans, the luxury condo she was saving for. When James stepped away to take a phone call from work, Lisa glanced around our living room and remarked, "This place could really use an update. Those curtains must be from the 90s. Her comment stung, but I smiled politely and changed the subject. Over the next few months, James spent less time visiting me and more time with Lisa. When we did talk, all his stories somehow involved her. I was happy he had found someone, but couldn't shake the feeling that she was changing him. The modest, thoughtful young man who once insisted on helping elderly neighbors with their groceries now talked about status symbols and appearances in ways that were foreign to me. Then came the announcement I had been dreading. After only 6 months of dating, James proudly told me they were engaged. Lisa flashed a diamond ring that must have cost 3 months of his salary. When I expressed concern about the rushed timeline, James assured me that when you know, you know. The look of adoration in his eyes made it clear my concerns would fall on deaf ears. Lisa wanted a wedding that belonged in a celebrity magazine. James called me one evening, sounding stressed about the mounting costs. The venue alone was $30,000. The flowers, another $8,000. The photographer, the band, the gourmet menu, all adding up to a sum that made my stomach clench. "Mom, I know it seems extravagant," James said, "but Lisa only plans to get married once. She deserves her dream day." What could I say? I wanted my son to be happy. So I withdrew $25,000 from my retirement savings, money I had carefully set aside for years, and gave it to James as a wedding gift. The gratitude in his eyes almost made it worth it. Almost. The wedding was indeed spectacular, held at a vineyard overlooking the valley, with 200 guests, many of whom I had never met. Lisa looked stunning in her designer gown, and James was handsome in his tuxedo. But, as the mother of the groom, I found myself seated at a table far from the main party, with distant relatives of Lisa's family who barely spoke to me. Throughout the reception, Lisa's parents made numerous speeches about their accomplished daughter and her bright future. They mentioned James only in passing, and me not at all. During the father-daughter dance, I overheard Lisa's father talking to another guest. Well, at least she got a man with potential. A few more years under Lisa's guidance, and no one will even remember he came from such humble beginnings. They both chuckled, unaware I was standing nearby. After the wedding, James and Lisa rented a small apartment downtown. I visited them once, bringing homemade cookies and a houseplant as gifts. Lisa accepted them with a tight smile and placed the cookies in the pantry, without offering any to us. The apartment was nicely decorated, but small, and I soon learned that Lisa was unhappy with it. "This place is just temporary," she told me over coffee while James was in the other room. "Daddy wanted to help us buy something better, but I insisted we make it on our own. Of course, James needs to push harder for that promotion. His salary alone isn't enough for the neighborhood we should be living in." Over the next few months, I watched as Lisa's spending habits strained their finances. She bought designer clothes, insisted on dining at expensive restaurants, and took weekend trips with her friends, while James worked overtime. When I gently suggested to James that they might want to create a budget, he became defensive. "Lisa works hard, Mom. She deserves nice things. We are managing just fine." But they weren't managing fine. 6 months after the wedding, James called me, sounding defeated. "We want to buy a house, Mom. Lisa found the perfect place in Oakwood Estates, but we don't have nearly enough for the down payment. The bank wants at least 20%, and with Lisa's student loans and my car payment, my heart sank. Oakwood Estates was one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city. But before I could respond, James continued, his voice brightening. Lisa had an idea. She remembered that you mentioned possibly downsizing soon. What if you sold your house and used some of the money to help us with the down payment? You could live with us. The house has 4 bedrooms, plenty of space. It would be perfect. I sat in silence, considering his words. My home, though modest, was filled with memories. It was where I had raised James, where Robert and I had started our life together. But it was also larger than I needed now, and the maintenance was becoming difficult as I aged. Let me think about it, I told him. After careful consideration, I made what I thought was a generous offer. I would sell my house and contribute 60% of the down payment for their new home. In return, I would live with them in my own space within the house. James was thrilled. Lisa, when I spoke with her directly, seemed less enthusiastic, but agreed to the arrangement. The house in Oakwood Estates was everything Lisa had wanted. 4,000 square feet, with a gourmet kitchen, marble bathrooms, hardwood floors, and a manicured lawn. It sat on a corner lot in a neighborhood filled with doctors, lawyers, and executives. The price tag was just under $1 million. After selling my home of 30 years, I contributed $600,000 toward their new house, money that represented decades of hard work and careful saving. The agreement, which I insisted we put in writing, stated that I would have the downstairs guest suite with its own bathroom as my private space, and that my name would remain on the deed as co-owner of the property. The first few weeks were pleasant enough. Lisa seemed genuinely grateful for my help, and James was over the moon about their new status as homeowners in an upscale neighborhood. I took pleasure in setting up my new space, arranging my few treasured possessions in the guest suite. I even enjoyed helping with meal preparation and keeping the house tidy while both James and Lisa worked. But gradually, things began to change. Lisa started leaving her breakfast dishes in the sink, expecting me to wash them. She would drop her dry cleaning ticket on the counter with cash, assuming I would pick it up. When I prepared dinner, she would make comments about the seasoning or presentation, comparing it unfavorably to restaurants she preferred. Essie, could you make sure to dust the living room before my colleagues come over tomorrow? Oh, and please wear something nicer. Last time, Mr. Peterson asked if you were the cleaning lady, Lisa said one evening, not even looking up from her phone. I bit my tongue and nodded. For James's sake, I told myself. Just to keep the peace. James was thriving at work recently. Promoted to senior engineer. He traveled frequently for projects, sometimes gone for days at a time. When he was home, Lisa was always on her best behavior, acting as if we were one big happy family. But the moment his car pulled out of the driveway, her demeanor would change completely. Lisa began hosting dinner parties and book club meetings without giving me any notice. I would come out of my room to find 10 women in designer outfits, sipping wine in the living room, looking at me as if I were an intruder. After these gatherings, Lisa would leave the mess for me to clean up wine glasses scattered across the house, food crumbs ground into the expensive carpet. Oh, Essie, would you mind tidying up James? And I have tickets to the theater tonight, she would say, already dressed to go out, not waiting for my response. One morning, Lisa knocked on my door with what she called a brilliant idea. Essie, I've been thinking this downstairs suite would make the perfect home spa and gym. There's plenty of space in the basement for you. It's cozy down there, and you'd have more privacy." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. The basement was unfinished, with concrete floors and exposed pipes. There was a small window, that let in minimal light. But again, for James's sake, I agreed. I spent the next weekend moving my belongings to the basement. James helped when he could, apologizing privately that his work schedule prevented him from doing more. "It's just temporary, Mom," he assured me. "Once we finish the basement renovations, it will be really nice down here." But months passed, and no renovations began. My new room was cold and damp. During heavy rains, water would seep in around the window. I bought a dehumidifier and space heater with my own money. When I mentioned the water issue to James, he promised to look into waterproofing, but Lisa always found more urgent ways to spend their home improvement budget. Meanwhile, my responsibilities grew. Lisa now expected me to do all the grocery shopping, cooking, cleaning, and laundry. She would leave lists of specific items from specialty stores across town. If I purchased the wrong brand of sparkling water or forgot her favorite imported cheese, I would hear about it for days. "James and I both work so hard," she would say, if I ever expressed fatigue. "The least you could do is help out, considering we're providing you with a place to live." I tried to speak with James privately about the situation. "Son, I think we need to revisit our arrangement. This isn't what I agreed to." James looked torn. "Mom, Lisa is under a lot of pressure at work. She just made junior executive, and she's trying to impress her boss. Once things settle down, it will get better. Please be patient." I wanted to remind him that I had contributed most of the money for the house, that I was not their servant, that I deserved respect. But the pleading look in his eyes stopped me. He was caught between his wife and his mother, and I didn't want to make things harder for him. The final straw came when I discovered Lisa had thrown away a box of Robert's belongings that I had kept all these years. His watch letters he had written me during our courtship, the tie he wore at our wedding. When I confronted her, tears streaming down my face, she shrugged. "That box was taking up space in the storage room. It was just old junk collecting dust. You need to let go of the past, Essie." I told James that evening, my heart breaking all over again at the loss of these precious mementos. "I'll talk to her," he promised. But nothing changed. No apology came from Lisa, no recognition of what she had taken from me. I began to feel like a stranger in the house I had helped buy. I ate my meals alone in the basement most days. Lisa would enter my room without knocking, borrowing things without asking. She rearranged furniture I had brought from my old home, claiming it didn't match her aesthetic. Then came the dinner party that would change everything. Lisa barged into my basement room on a Tuesday afternoon. "My parents are coming for dinner on Friday. I need you to prepare something impressive. Dad loves a good roast, and Mom is expecting your apple pie that James keeps raving about. Make sure the house is spotless. Oh, and please stay in your room once you've served the food. We need to discuss some family matters." She turned to leave, then paused. "And wear your navy dress, not those old sweaters you usually wear." I spent all day Friday preparing for the dinner. I woke up at 5 in the morning to start the slow roasted beef that Lisa had requested. I baked fresh bread, prepared 3 different side dishes, and made the apple pie from scratch. Between cooking, I dusted every surface, vacuumed, mopped, and polished the silver serving dishes that Lisa had received as wedding gifts but never used. By 6 o'clock, when Lisa's parents were due to arrive, everything was ready. The table was set, with the fine china candles were lit, and the house smelled of delicious food. I had even put on the navy dress as requested, though my back ached from standing all day. Lisa's parents, Harold and Margaret Collins, arrived precisely at 6. Harold was a successful investment banker, tall and imposing, with silver hair and an expensive suit. Margaret was slim and elegant, her blonde hair, now mostly gray, styled perfectly diamonds glittering at her ears and throat. They barely acknowledged me as Lisa welcomed them in air-kissing their cheeks. James arrived home from work just minutes before the guests, looking tired but putting on a smile. He gave me a quick hug and whispered, "Everything looks amazing, Mom." "Thank you." At first, dinner progressed smoothly. I served each course as Lisa had instructed, refilled wine glasses, and stayed mostly silent as the Collins family discussed their recent trip to Europe, their country club memberships, and Harold's new sports car. James contributed occasionally to the conversation, clearly trying to impress his in-laws. When it came time for dessert, I brought out the apple pie with homemade vanilla ice cream. As I was setting the plates down, Margaret looked up at me. "Lisa, how long have you had this housekeeper? She's quite efficient." Before James could speak, Lisa laughed lightly. "Oh, that's not our housekeeper mother. That's James's mom, Essie. She lives in the basement and helps around the house in exchange for room and board, like our own personal maid." The room seemed to freeze. I stood there, dessert plate still in my hand, as Harold chuckled. "Well, that's a convenient arrangement. Good help is so hard to find these days." I looked at James, waiting for him to say something, to defend me, to remind everyone that I had contributed the majority of the money for this house. But he just gave an uncomfortable laugh, his eyes not meeting mine. "Yes," Lisa continued, warming to her topic. "She does all the cooking and cleaning. Of course, sometimes I have to show her how to do things properly. You know, people from her generation don't always understand modern standards." Margaret nodded sympathetically. My mother was the same way, simply couldn't grasp the concept of organic, locally sourced ingredients. And her ideas about decorating were absolutely outdated. I carefully set down the dessert I was holding. My hands were steady, though my heart was racing. Without a word, I turned and walked out of the dining room, hearing Lisa's voice behind me. "See what I mean? So sensitive. The older generation just can't take constructive feedback." I went straight to my room in the basement and opened the locked drawer where I kept important documents. I pulled out the thick folder containing the house purchase agreement, the deed with my name clearly listed as co-owner, and the bank statements showing my $600,000 contribution. As I climbed the stairs back to the dining room, I could hear them laughing, Lisa telling some story about how I had once used the wrong setting on the washing machine and turned her white blouses pink. "It was like something out of an old sitcom," she was saying. The helpless old lady, confused by modern appliances. I entered the dining room quietly, the folder clutched in my hands. No one noticed me, at first, too engaged in their laughter at my expense. I cleared my throat, and 4 heads turned toward me. "Excuse the interruption," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "But I think there has been a misunderstanding about my role in this household." Lisa's smile faded. "Essie, we're having a private family discussion. Could this wait?" I placed the folder on the table and opened it. "No, Lisa, it cannot wait. You see, I am not your maid, your cook, or your housekeeper. I am the co-owner of this house." I slid the deed across the table. "As you can see, my name is on this deed alongside James and Lisa. I contributed $600,000 to the purchase of this home. That represents 60% of the total cost." Harold picked up the document, his brow furrowing as he read. Margaret's mouth formed a perfect O of surprise. James looked down at his plate, his face red with shame. Lisa's expression hardened into something ugly. Now I have been patient. I have cooked your meals, cleaned your messes, and endured your disrespect because I love my son and wanted this arrangement to work. My voice remained steady, though inside I was trembling. But I will not be referred to as your maid, especially in front of guests in a home that I largely paid for. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my house key, placing it on the table with a soft clink. If you truly believe I am the help, then consider this my resignation. Good luck with the mortgage payments without my contribution. Harold looked sharply at his daughter. Lisa, you told us you and James purchased this house on your own. You said his mother was staying temporarily because she had nowhere else to go. She exaggerated. James finally spoke, his voice quiet. Mom sold her house to help us buy this one. The agreement was that she would live here permanently in her own space. Not that she would be treated as unpaid household staff, I added. Lisa's face flushed red. This is ridiculous. We let you live here rent-free. Let me. I couldn't help the short laugh that escaped me. Lisa, without my $600,000, you wouldn't be living here either. I turned to James, my heart breaking at the conflict in his eyes. I'm sorry, son. I love you, but I cannot stay where I'm not respected. With that, I walked out of the room and down to the basement. With shaking hands, I began packing my essential belongings into 2 suitcases. I could hear raised voices upstairs. Lisa defending herself. Harold demanding explanations. James trying to mediate. I called for a taxi on my cell phone, asking the driver to meet me in 15 minutes. As I finished packing, James came down to the basement, his face ashen. Mom, please don't go. Lisa didn't mean it the way it sounded. You know how she gets when her parents are here? She tries too hard to impress them. I looked at my son, this man I had raised alone, had sacrificed for, had loved with every fiber of my being. James, I love you more than anything in this world, but I have spent the last year being treated as less than human in a house I helped buy. I cannot do it anymore. Where will you go? He asked, his voice small, like when he was a child afraid of the dark. I've saved enough for a security deposit on an apartment. I'll be fine. I zipped my suitcase closed. I need time to think about what happens next with the house and my investment. James helped me carry my bags upstairs. Lisa was nowhere to be seen, but I could hear her angry voice coming from the kitchen, still arguing with her parents. Without another word, I walked out the front door to the waiting taxi. That night, I checked into an extended stay hotel. The room was small, but clean, with a kitchenette and a view of the city park. As I sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of what had just happened crashed over me. I cried for the first time since leaving the house. Not from sadness, but from relief. The constant tension, the walking on eggshells, the disrespect. It was over. I had stood up for myself. The next morning, I began apartment hunting. Within a week, I had secured a modest 1-bedroom in a senior living community not far from my old neighborhood. The rent was reasonable, and the community offered activities and companionship I hadn't realized I was missing. James called daily, sometimes multiple times. Lisa never called. After a week, James appeared at my new apartment, looking haggard and stressed. Mom, please come back. Lisa is sorry about what happened. The mortgage payment is due next week, and without your contribution, he couldn't finish the sentence. Has Lisa come to apologize to me directly? I asked, already knowing the answer. James looked down. She's working through some things. Her parents are pretty upset with her too. They had no idea about the financial arrangement. I'm not coming back, James. That chapter is closed. But I'm willing to discuss options for the house. 2 days later, Lisa appeared at my door. No hug, no warm greeting. She stood stiffly in my small living room, looking around with barely disguised disdain. James says I need to apologize, she began, her tone making it clear how little she meant it. So I'm sorry if you were offended by what I said. It was just a joke that got taken the wrong way. I nodded, not accepting, but acknowledging her words. And what do you propose we do about the house situation? Lisa's expression hardened. We can't lose that house. It's perfect. Everyone at work knows we live there. My parents' friends live in that neighborhood. Can't you just continue contributing to the mortgage while living somewhere else? I almost laughed at her audacity. No, Lisa, that's not how investments work. I have 3 options to propose. 1, you and James buy out my share of the house at fair market value. 2, we sell the house and split the proceeds according to our initial investments. Or 3, I move back in, but with clear written agreements about my status as co-owner, not domestic help. Lisa's face flushed with anger. That's ridiculous. We can't afford to buy you out, and I am not selling my dream house because you're too sensitive to take a joke. Then I guess we're at an impasse, I said calmly. My lawyer will be in touch about proceeding with a forced sale. Lisa stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I knew I was doing the right thing, but that didn't make it any easier. I was forcing my son into a difficult position, and the thought of causing him pain was almost unbearable. But I also knew that sometimes love means setting boundaries, even when it hurts. As it turned out, the third option wasn't truly feasible. The trust was broken, and no written agreement could repair what had happened. After consulting with a real estate attorney, I moved forward with legal proceedings to force the sale of the house. Lisa fought it every step of the way, hiring her own lawyer to contest the sale. But the documentation was clear. My name was on the deed, my contribution was well documented, and I had every legal right to reclaim my investment. During this time, James came to see me regularly. At first, his visits were strained, filled with pleas to reconsider. But gradually, as Lisa's true nature continued to reveal itself in her angry outbursts and manipulation tactics, he began to see the situation more clearly. I should have stood up for you that night, he admitted during one visit, looking down at his coffee cup. I've been thinking about it a lot. Actually, I should have stood up for you every time Lisa treated you disrespectfully. I failed you, Mom. And I'm so sorry. His words healed something in me that I hadn't realized was broken. You're here now, I told him, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. That's what matters. After 3 months of legal wrangling, the house was finally put on the market. It sold quickly for even more than we had paid. After real estate fees and paying off the mortgage, my share came to just over $620,000, enough to buy a comfortable condo outright in a nice part of town. Lisa and James received their 40% share, but it wasn't enough to purchase another home in Oakwood Estates. They were forced to downsize to a townhouse in a less prestigious neighborhood. Lisa was furious, blaming me for ruining their social standing. James, however, seemed relieved to be free of the financial pressure. What happened next didn't surprise me as much as it might have once. 6 months after moving into the townhouse, James called me with news that he and Lisa were separating. Her spending habits hadn't changed, but their income had, and the arguments had become constant. The final straw came when James discovered Lisa had secretly opened credit cards in his name and racked up significant debt. I feel like I'm waking up from a long dream, he told me. Looking back, I can see all the warning signs I ignored. The way she treated you was just the beginning. I was so blinded by her beauty and confidence that I couldn't see who she really was. The divorce was finalized a year after the infamous dinner party. Lisa got the townhouse and a settlement, while James moved into a small apartment to rebuild his finances. He was subdued for a long time, processing the end of his marriage and the mistakes he had made. But gradually, the James Weston new, kind, thoughtful, genuine, re-emerged. Our relationship healed and deepened. James would come over for dinner weekly, sometimes bringing groceries and cooking for me instead. We talked more openly than we ever had before, about Robert, about James's childhood, about our hopes and disappointments. In a strange way, the painful experience had given us a gift, a more honest and equal relationship as adults. I never regretted my decision to stand up for myself that night. It was one of the hardest things I had ever done, walking away from my son and the house I had invested in. But it taught me that love doesn't mean being a doormat. Real love requires honesty, boundaries, and sometimes the courage to say, enough. 2 years after that fateful dinner, I sat in my cozy condo watching James chop vegetables in my kitchen as he told me about a new woman he had started dating, a kindergarten teacher who volunteered at animal shelters on weekends. The way he described her was different than how he had talked about Lisa. There was no mention of her appearance or status, only her kindness and the way she made him laugh. "I want you to meet her mom," he said, "but not right away. I'm taking things slowly this time, really getting to know her first." I smiled, recognizing the wisdom in his words. "I'd like that when you're both ready." As I watched my son, I felt a profound sense of peace. We had weathered a storm together and come out stronger on the other side. Sometimes, standing up for yourself means walking away from situations that diminish you, even when it breaks your heart to do so. And sometimes, the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful outcomes. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others is to have the courage to say no and to stand tall in your own dignity. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a difficult family situation? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please like this video. If it resonated with you, subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to treat yourself.